Welcome to Health School. We are on a mission to redefine health globally by bridging the gap between the healthcare system with the health and fitness industry. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and don't forget to share this with all of your friends on social media. Your help goes a long way. I'm your host, Jake Carter, and together, let's make a difference. And there we go, we're recording, we are live. Jake, it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you now and have you on the podcast. It's my first podcast that I've done in a long time, probably a couple of years. So guys, listeners, I'm sure you'll know Jake. For those of you which don't, check him out. He is phenomenal at what he does. His voice is loud, his position is strong, and he is truly changing the industry. And brother, it's been a pleasure to know you for the number of years what we've known each other, and it's even more so a pleasure to do this call today. So
thank you, mate.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Do you remember when we first met? Like we met digitally.
Yeah.
But, do you remember how that happened? I heard about you, and that day I'm like, man, this guy knows his stuff. I want to be coached by him. And I emailed you that day, and you're like, hey, let's jump on a call.
It was like 3 a.m.
Then, it was. Yeah. You're like, I was like, what is going on? Who is this guy? He's like, yeah, let's jump on a call in like 15 minutes.
Yeah. I remember it was like that was the early days of stepping into the world of my online coaching experience, and I was in that grind hard hustle mode, and I was working obviously long fucking days. And I think it was like 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. I get this email through. I'm like, yeah, let's jump on now. And then we connected, and it was good. It was great. And it's really, really nice to speak with someone who shares the same passion, values, intellect for the topics, and not just introspective of the industry, but on a macro level in terms of the world, you know? So yeah, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you, man. I really am grateful for that. I'm grateful of the connection, what we have, and the way that it is heading. So dude, today, what I want to do is I want to go over there's three main questions, which I think is going to be really epic for the listeners to kind of understand, because I really think success leaves clues, crumbs, whatever. And I think a lot in regards to a lot of our content, we do so much value add and so much depth and kind of like left brain things where people can be quite distant from connecting with who we actually are and the deeper meaning of our sense, our mission, our purpose, and other factors. So basically today I'd love to go over in a short moment, basically the biggest mistakes we've made in this industry, the industry challenges, what you see right now, and the future of which you see this industry moving in. And we can put our heads together and jam about a few concepts. But before I go into that, is it okay with you if I just share some stats, what I've collected, just so we can pre-frame this to the listeners? And I think this is me presuming, Quinn. It's never good to presume, but knowing what I know about you, I think there's a lot of synergy and interdependency with our views. I think this would be a nice groundwork and framework to layer the stuff what you're about to communicate on. Yeah.
Just before you jump into that, I think it's interesting you say, you know, we put a lot of value out there. We put a lot of like educational content out there, and maybe don't always kind of talk about stuff from like a personal perspective or own sort of subjective opinion. And I think it's almost because it's like you can't have an opinion now that's not backed in a scientific journal. And so for me, like when it comes to social media, I'm like, man, if I don't have at least one reference there, I can't say it. So it's taken us away from actually just sharing our opinion. And it's funny that we're starting this conversation with stats, you know, like we still need that.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Isn't it? Yeah. But no, let's jump into these stats and let's go. I think that sounds good.
Yeah, it seems counterproductive now. But I guess that's the hardship what we've been through, right? It's like speaking about the stuff what we spoke about. I mean, how many years have you been in the industry now?
Oh, well, full-time, I don't know. It all blends. Hey, getting close to 10 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, like from us speaking about this stuff and the challenges what we had back then were a lot harder than what we have now. Like now we speak about gut health online and people are like, yay, gut health. But back then it's like people like, you're a fucking hippie. There's no science, macros, bro. And we really had to hold the fucking line and fight. And from that, I guess that was some kind of, I think with every hardship, there's an opportunity. And I think that was probably a learning experience, what we both shared, where it really reinforced us to come from an evidence-based background, but whilst keeping our minds open, which is interesting. And I have no doubt we wouldn't be where we are today if we didn't have those challenges to model us in those behavioral mechanisms. But you pointed it out, which was blind to me, but we are fucking still doing the same on the call right now. But that's really interesting. Another thing as well, what I just want to add to that, dude, is this might just be me, but we see a lot of polarizing content on the world of social media, but it's polarizing from a position to stand out. Like it's an opinion just to have an opinion, and to just be seen, heard, and sound. And I think that could also be a repellent to us from expressing those things, because we don't want to get classified as these people with biased approaches as such. So I think that could also be a thing. But interesting. Fuck, this is going to be a deep call. So anyway, I'm going to go through these, and I'm not going to take my time. So that also means I'm probably going to speak quite fast. But it's just going to lay the framework of this. And there's some really, 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 really interesting stats here, which explain some of the behaviors as such for this world, what we're living in. And I just would really honor and respect, the dialogue of your opinion around this. So
how fast are you going to, is this like modafinil fast? Have you had modafinil today?
I've not had modafinil in a while. I've actually, this is digressing again. Dude, I've actually really laid off all the supplements. Like it's weird. Like I used to be so heavy on supplements, and like, I've just not had any in a long time, which is weird. But
maybe that's a conversation we have. Maybe we talk about that a little bit later, because I think that might be interesting for people, what we both actually do from that perspective, because we do obviously talk about supplements quite a lot.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be valuable for people to hear. So anyway, in 2018, the health industry was worth 8.45 trillion, which is quite a lot. But then due to COVID-19 pandemic, global healthcare, yada, 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 it's now estimated to be $10 trillion, which is quite a lot there. And then when we look into some of these other stats here, we can see that 1 out of 8 people, citizens in the United States of America, are employed in the healthcare industry. So obviously right now, when we take those notions and we view it from kind of a bird's eye view approach, there's a big demand for health. But then when we look into the healthcare system, as you know, as I've heard you say so many times, that the healthcare system is not a healthcare system, it's more disease management, which explains why chronic disease is expected to reach $47 trillion in healthcare costs by 2030, which is actually more than the annual GDP of the 6 largest economies in the world, which is quite a lot. So now we're starting to understand, well, there's a big demand, and it might not be working that well. And to make things worse, the current system's crumbling because statistically doctors have an average lifespan less than that of their patients. And within the UK, doctors spend an average of 9.4 minutes with patients. And you have to question, is that enough time to build rapport, assess, conclude, educate, and prescribe? And then in a 2013 survey, the average number of patient visits per day for a doctor was 19. So for all the coaches out there listening to this, if you did 19 check-ins in one day, I'm sure the 19th, maybe 18th, maybe 17th, hell, maybe even the 11th check-in probably isn't going to be as good as the first, second, or third. Now imagine that when someone's kind of health depends on it. And then we could look into how far stretched and demanded this industry is. Like with nurses working 12.5-hour shifts report committing more than 3 times as many medical errors than those working 8.5-hour shifts. So now think of how many people have been laid off work because of certain reasons and how stretched they are. And they're now possibly reporting 3 times as many medical errors. And when we're talking medical errors, it's not like, oh, I gave you an extra aspirin. They could be quite severe, and it could be compounded to iatrogenic deaths and disease. And then on top of that, doctors only have a minimum of 4 weeks nutritional education. Around 30 years ago, only 37% of medical schools had a single nutrition course. And this number has now dropped down to 27%. Most medical schools in the US devote only 2 hours of sleep education, which is 0.06% of total classroom education, despite patients spending a third of their life asleep. And the human body is compartmentalized into relative silos. Medical costs for people classified as obese is $1,429 more expensive than those of normal healthy weight. So already there's some stats, and there's just a few more to go through. But when we look into the health professionals, we can see that the average physician's net income adjusted for inflation has declined by 7% between 1995 and 2003. Students which graduate from a public medical school have a median debt of 100,000 USDs, whilst private school graduates have a debt of 135,000. And then compared with 1984, the median debt for public school graduates was 22,000 and private school students 27,000. And then the final parts here, when we look into kind of like the health and fitness industry, we'd say that I would say it's missing of health, but 90% of personal trainers quit within the first year. Within
what percent?
90%, man. And this is it. Like, you think about this, how many people do you know which did the Cert 3s and never even started?
Yeah, they didn't even start. That's the bigger number.
And that's why it's so big. It's because this mismanaged expectations of what they see online and the smoke and mirrors effect to what actually is required. And then within the US, 17% of gyms closed down permanently due to COVID-19. 80% of people who joined the gym in January leave within 5 months. And then over 90% of entry courses for health and fitness industry fail to teach business. Social media, apps, ebooks are now replacing personal trainers with low skill sets. But with all of that being said, there is some benefit for all of this. There is some sunrise over the horizon, so to speak. The World Health Organization estimates that between 65 and 80% of the world's population rely on holistic medicine as their primary form of healthcare. That's quite cool. That's a big number. Wow. 65 to 80%. That's from WHO. COVID-19 has changed the outlook on telehealth. In the US, 76% currently use telehealth compared with only 11% in 2019. So that means like more people are going for that digitalized approach and transition online. The growth of telehealth was exponential, increasing 50 to 175 times when compared to pre-COVID. 57% of providers view telehealth more favorably than they did before COVID-19. In 2020, there was $14 billion spent on digital health. Global telehealth usage had increased 38% from January 2020. Approximately 250 billion of all US Medicare could be potentially virtualized. And finally, the health and wellness industry growth is 6.4% based on 2015 to 2017 data. So they're the stats. Obviously, I went through them quite fast, but I think that just kind of lays the framework of the experience, what we've both had, and arguably what's to come of your opinion and your challenges and the direction of which this industry is going in. So before we go into those three main questions, I'd love to hear some of your insights on that.
It's not good, is it? Like,
no,
I mean, basically, we're in trouble. Yeah. And, you know, if we look at, like, I know you didn't touch on like Aussie stats, but have you seen some of the Aussie stats have just come out from the census?
70%, was it?
I mean, that was a bit prior to the census. In March, they reported 75% of Aussies Aussie adults, I think it was, have a chronic health condition. 75%, like far out.
Yeah. And this is what we base our standards on as well.
Yeah.
So it's alarming. It's extremely alarming. And this is why I really think the talk today is going to be so valuable, because being veteraned within this industry, I think there's a great opportunity for people to observe the path what you have walked and the path what you are walking and also soon to step into. So I think it's powerful. I think it's needed. I'd arguably say this is the most needed industry and unknowingly desired industry what the world faces today based on those stats.
Yeah. And what's cool with those stats is how cool, I don't know if this is cool, it's concerning, all of the above, but how much of a shift has occurred in, obviously if we look at pre-pandemic to now, there's a lot that can be said, but so much stuff has gone digital. There's obviously been a huge spike in various other health conditions because of people not seeing healthcare providers for so long. So there's this shift which has occurred in terms of even just like service providing that we've not really seen before. Like maybe 10 years ago that the health industry started to dabble with going online, and, we started offering hybrid services, and, you were part of that. I was part of that when we started taking some clients online and some we'd see in person, whatever else. But now at this point, over the last 2 years and even still now, this is probably the biggest shift that the health and fitness industry has seen potentially in forever. And we're still seeing what that's going to look like. That's still evolving.
Yeah. And when you view the world from that kind of macro perspective, there's so much infusion with technology from artificial intelligence just through automation and systemization, where it's like coaches have to also keep up with how to do stuff now online. And don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. But it's almost like when we first started, there was magazines. Like I would buy Muscle Mag, right? Back in the bro bodybuilding days when I first started, I'd be looking at like pictures of like Branch Warren and all of that and Kai Green. And that was a lot of our material, like arguably not so much educational, but nonetheless, it was physical material. You have to walk to the store, purchase it and get it, take it home and read it. And now there's the whole world at your fingertips, which creates great opportunity, but with also great responsibility, because if people don't keep up with that, they're just going to get left behind. We're not even taught how to run a fucking business in these schools. Yeah. And the ones which do don't really teach you to run it online. And then the ones, if they do teach you to run it online, fail to do so where you create intimacy at scale rather than just creating people to be lost in the cobwebs and left in the dark. So I think times are changing extremely fast. And I think there's huge opportunity with that. You're not limited by geographical radius, affluence of the area, and other things, but it also requires a whole new dialogue of skill.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a big thing. You haven't even jumped into your questions yet, but I think like if we look at challenges I suppose that coaches are facing, if we look at 10 years ago even, a coach would step into the industry, and what skill set did they need? They needed to maybe understand exercise science well, understand anatomy well, maybe understand nutrition. That would be, if you nail those aspects, like that was 90% of the job. And then all you need to do is be able to communicate, like not be like have a bit of personality, a little bit of charisma. That was it. You nailed it as a coach. But now you need all of that. Plus you need administration skills, and you need technology skills, and you need systems, like whatever skill set that's under, you need to be able to develop and run those systems. You need coaching, and not coaching, you need like almost counseling skills and psychology skills. And how many people have, mental health issues and mental health problems nowadays, and how prevalent are things like disordered eating. Like you need to understand that whole aspect now, probably more so than you did in the past. And now we wonder, well, why are coaches, 90% finishing within the first year? Well, that's why. Because these guys got into the industry thinking all I need to know is how the body works, and I need to understand a little bit of anatomy and how to exercise, and I'll nail it. It's like, no. That's 10% of what you need to be a good coach nowadays. And I don't know about you. For me, that's why I kind of, that's why I wasn't one of those 90%, because I was lucky enough when I stepped into the industry, I had a fairly good handle on how to use technology. Before I became a coach, and I was coordinating a few different projects. I was, working for sort of development agencies, and I had to know how to use a computer, and I had to know how to do an email, and I had to have a certain level of professionalism and be able to email people back. And that's a skill set. Most coaches, like, it's a basic thing, but most coaches don't even have that.
Yeah. So that's good that you had that. Like I started at 15. It was a challenge for me to learn, like a big challenge for me to learn. And when we view that as well, I think this is quite interesting because we were briefly speaking about the concept of this, but I was saying that a lot of coaches lack drive or ownership of actions. Okay. And I think one factor for this, I know you've got a theory and I'd love to hear that, but one theory what I have is that coaches which have seen how it works from personal trainers back in the day, or possibly has been a personal trainer from back in the day, and then they move online, it's a completely different model. Because when you're an in-person coach, you go on like, okay, so this is what we're going to do, quick structural assessment, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do 4 sets of 8, 4, 0, 1, 0 tempo. Let me check your form. And they have the excuse then just to check out in their mind and just boom, easy. And they become a glorified rep counter or a timer for tempo and shit like this. But now, online is none of that. You're not going 4 sets of 8, 4, 0, 1, 0. Let's go. You're not saying that anymore. It's a completely different thing. Now it's actually behavioral psychology and communication to get them to do the stuff without you holding the hand, which is better because it doesn't create codependency, but it is a different skill with an online PT and an in-person PT, or a health coach in person and a health coach online. It's completely different, I'd say. So that's my theory, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's a huge aspect to it. I 100% agree with that. And that's kind of what I was getting at a little bit with that different skill set needed. And my theory is kind of that, just a little bit expanded in that when people get into the industry, you normally get into it because you're passionate about it. Yeah. And so if we look at, I mean, people you and I would have grown up and listened to and learned from, people like Charles Poliquin. If we look at some of these guys, Charles would say, what did he say? That the best coaches are spending, like 8 hours or more than 8 hours a week, educating and learning this stuff. And that's the thing is you want to do that because you're passionate about it. But people like Charles, what did he do? He worked with athletes. He worked with, Olympic athletes. He's not online counseling someone. He was in there cueing someone, counting tempo, teaching how to do a squat. Yeah. And so I think that's part of it, is that it used to be not maybe easier to be passionate about what you were doing. Because you're like, well, I enjoy exercise for myself. I enjoy, this component of it. Therefore, I learn this stuff out of my own interest. And so I want to do 16-hour days. I mean, I remember someone asking Charles once, how did you become so lucky? How did you become such a successful coach? And he goes, luck. Like, what do you mean luck? I was doing 18-hour days. That's not luck. Doing that for years is not luck. And that's the thing, is you don't get people now who are willing to do, you do, but not many, who are willing to do 16-hour days, 18-hour days on a computer. That's different to being in a gym setting for 18 hours, 12 hours in a gym. And so I think there's that component as well, where it's like, well, who's passionate about being on Zoom all day, or who's passionate about systems? And some people are, and like, I know you love systems, right? So like some people, yes, but a lot of coaches, they're not getting into it because that's the stuff they're passionate about. And so they do their 8 hours on a computer and they're like, that's me done, and how, even if we look at 8 hours compared to 14 hours, if you're, back in the day, you've got coaches who are passionate about what they're doing, they're spending 14, 16 hours a day doing this stuff. Well, that's double the time. How much more experience are you going to acquire doing double the hours? How much better are you going to get? If we just look at skill development as a, time spent doing that skill, geez, as a coach, I mean, like for me, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I worked at a really bloody busy gym. This, we spoke a lot when I worked there, and I was taking 60 plus clients a week. Yeah. And what I learned doing that, I learned more doing that in a year than most coaches learned in 5 years, because I had more clients than most coaches will have in 5 years. That's how you grow.
Yeah, you need runs on the board. You need to get in the trenches, experience it, and get a couple of scars. And I think another thing there, what you brought up is responsibility. When you're online, there's no direct responsibility. You could be like, we've all done it. We've all done check-ins from bed, camera switched off, all of that, right? But that if that's how you treat your business, that's how your business will function. So there's that lack of responsibility, and in addition to that, there's a greater opportunity for distractions, because now you've got the social media just a click away, or you've got your phone ringing, and things can always be done later. They don't have to be done right now. So then that kind of mindset of lack of self-parenting just creates a whole kind of worms to be opened in terms of, actually running your business like a business as opposed to just having a job.
Yeah, spot on.
So let's have a look at these mistakes, man. I'd love to hear yours. I'm sure there's some of which are very similar. I think it's a great question to ask. And I'm excited to hear what you would say some of your biggest mistakes have been in this industry, maybe as a business, maybe as a coach, maybe as yourself. What would you say some of your biggest mistakes have been?
Each one of those subcategories are quite different. Business mistakes versus myself as a practitioner mistakes versus even how I deal with clients. That a client's not going to see my business mistakes usually, and it's, I guess, vice versa. So I guess if I was to look at kind of my service mistakes, mistakes I've made with clients and the service I'm providing, I think one is you get a lot of, I know I've mentioned Charles a few times. Charles used to say that Aussie coaches upskilled more than anyone he knew. He said, this is why Aussie coaches are the best, because they're always spending money on education. And I know that to be true. You and I, we've both got a stack of coaches we mentor and educate, and people will spend money to learn. But I think, and maybe the shortcoming there is it's the difference between learning education and knowledge and synthesizing and integrating into your business, right?
Yes.
Now, not only, and that's a no-brainer. We all know that. And I think that's something maybe I found, I think I naturally took that a little bit easier. Like I would be in a course and I'd be sitting there in a course and there'd be one thing that I'd sort of hear, and then I'd almost like check out for the next hour because I'd be on my laptop and I'd be synthesizing that there and then in the actual workshop, being like, I know how to make this work.
Yeah.
But I think what maybe a challenge I did have is that when you are exposed to all these different views, all these different, ways of doing things and systems and whatnot, it's all well and good to have different perspective, and it's well and good to even know how to integrate those, but it's almost like you need a default to come back to before you kind of expand out of it. And I guess what I mean by that is, imagine you've got like, imagine you said, well, yeah, exactly. You just need these guidelines. Like imagine you said to a musician, hey, write me a song. The musician, I'm not a musician, so I don't know if this analogy is going to work, but the musician's like, well, what kind of song? What timing do you want? Like, what genre? Like, it's like, fuck, I don't know how to do that. But then you say, hey, write me a song in, this like standard timing, and I want it to be this genre and whatever. They're like, oh, easy, I'll nail this. And it's like, you kind of just need that sort of like, this is how I do it normally. And now I've got the ability to expand out of that, as opposed to, well, I sometimes I do it this way, and sometimes I do it this way, and sometimes I do it that way. And today I'm going to do it that way. You know what I mean? So I think it took me a while to, and I don't know that that's necessarily bad for younger coaches to be dabbling in different systems. You know what I mean? Like, are you going to do undulating periodization? Are you going to do linear periodization, reverse linear, daily undulating, weekly undulating? Try all those different systems. But at a certain point, you need to come back to having, this is my default way of doing it. For me, it's, if we're talking about periodization, my default is undulating periodization. And now I've got the liberty to fall outside that when I choose to, And it obviously doesn't need to be periodization, but anything, I think we need to have that. This is the default way I do this. This is the default way I service my clients. And now I can do that differently when I choose to. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I'm just taking some notes because there's a few things here which are coming up. And if we go back to the courses, this is something I think I recently posted about as well, is I used to be a course hoarder. Yeah. So I'd do so many courses. Some I won't even start. A lot I wouldn't finish, but I do them because I thought I had to do them to become more knowledgeable and better at what I do. But to truly get better at what you do, you have to do the stuff that you learn, which comes back into that reintegration process. And I also think that was possibly from an identity perspective, because when we view it from like, okay, like one of the challenges what I had was I didn't go to university. I just started young and just rocked on, and that would be a remark made from haters as such. So therefore I superseded that with the internal dialogue of doing more courses to qualify my skill set. So I think that kind of relays into that as what you're saying in terms of doing courses, not implementing it, not following through, and not knowing what your baseline is. That's another thing, is because what we see in the industry, because we've been around a while now, we see waves of certain things. There's a wave of this.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it was initially like, where at the beginning it was like Les Mills. Yeah. It's like Les Mills, group classes, cool. After that, it was like, maybe at the same time, it's like all about the thigh gap in women. And then after that, it was like strong is the new sexy. And then it was like, okay, well now, for dudes, it's like the new traps are abs, and then it was like CrossFit, and then it's like more calisthenics now, and then with that comes all the waves of like paleo, going keto, now carnivore, and then don't forget about intermittent fasting, which was a big thing in the past. And it's just this huge wave of stuff. And I think if you don't have that baseline, you don't have that anchor to what you do and who you work with and the problems, what you fix, then you can just ebb and flow with the waves of the industry without having a solid foundation. You don't have your feet on the ground. And I think that's where people get lost, confused, and forgetful of what they can do and possibly what they should do.
Yeah.
So I think it's a big
one. It doesn't mean that those are bad. Yeah. It doesn't mean that, everyone has to do your system. No one can be carnivore and no one can be veggie, whatever. But like you said, you just need to have that anchor. Like I remember this one time, there was this coach I'd learned from really early on. And he was an amazing coach, a guy named Corey Baldock. You probably know Corey. Yeah. And, I remember learning from this guy. He walked in the first time I met him, and it was like an earthquake, man. Like every step, it's like, my God, this guy's thighs are so fucking big. Like the whole room is shaking. And then he's like this, I don't know, he's 6'6" kind of guy. I'm building him up now, but he's like piercing. And it's like, my goodness, like this dude is freaking jacked. He gets his clients jacked. All of his girls look freaking amazing. It's like, I want to do stuff the way he does stuff. And then I remember going out of that, and this is when I still sign up to, what is it, Fitness Australia or whatever, when you have to do your CECs. Oh, yeah. And I was working in a different gym, and I did this like a TRX workshop, right? And I remember sitting in this workshop, and they're like, these are all the different TRX exercises you can do, all this suspension trainer stuff. And if you've got a client who wants to get stronger deadlifting, you do this kind of TRX exercise and blah, blah, blah. And you do 1 foot balancing and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, this is the stuff I need to integrate with my clients. Okay, this is how I get them stronger. And then it dawned on me, I'm like, holy fuck, can you imagine Corey getting his clients doing a single leg TRX balance with their eyes closed? This guy doesn't give a fuck about that. This guy's just going to get them squatting and deadlifting, right? Yeah. And not that that's the only way you can do it, but it's like, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that being his system. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to just take on every other system just because it exists. Like, have your own system. And then if you want to expand for the certain, like, some clients may need some of that work. That's okay. But like you said, you need an anchor, and don't just grab onto the new thing as soon as it flies past. Yeah. Actually have that sticking point for you to go back to.
It's the same with blood work. Like, let's say if you're working with an assisted person, prior to them being assisted, hopefully they would have got some baseline blood work for you to look at their
hopefully
enzymes. Yeah. Well, you got more chance of winning the lottery, but it's the same thing. You need to know what works, what you vibe with, and everything else. Going in with that, there's something here which was a big mistake of mine. I briefly brought it up, which was caring about what haters said about me in the past. I'd love to know if that was a thing, what you ever experienced or challenged.
Man, I mean, you can't get through the social media game without attracting haters. Hey, like it's part of it. And I guess how you deal with that is sort of on you. But I remember, how we talked about the statistic conversation at the start and how you can't almost have an opinion without the stat or a journal. I remember when I want to be vague here. I don't want to put any names out there, but I was working for a big gym and I was asked to do a blog post on something. And this is sort of like that turning point where data, like information is now available on the internet, but there's still all of these the books and the magazines and the stuff that's a little bit more bro science. And I was asked to do a post on neurotransmitters, right? And I don't want to go too into it, but I relied a lot on the old school, Braverman type stuff and Pollock and stuff. And I put out this post thinking, man, I nailed this. I just captured everything that these old school bodybuilders talked about. And I kid you not, within 10 minutes, one of the biggest coaches in the world who specializes in this stuff called up my boss and was like, what have you just put out? This is not scientific. Here's why. And I was like, oh my God. And like, for me, that was a huge learning point where it's like, actually, just because someone I trust said it, that's not good enough anymore. You know, I need to believe it. B, a lot of people got stuff wrong, and like, I want to know where they've got that idea, what the credibility is, what the science is behind that. And so I guess because I had that learning experience pretty early on, it meant that I was always very guarded with the content I would put out. I always wanted to make sure that I could back it up if I needed to.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that maybe diluted like a little bit of the kind of hate that I could have received otherwise, just because like there was that sort of angle that I had. But I mean, like, it's still it's still freely flowing. And that's, I don't know, like I'd be lying if I said it doesn't affect me in some way. Like, I guess for me, I use it, I don't know if this is a healthy way of using it or not, but like I kind of use it to almost like, I suppose, motivation in a sense, and sort of like, I don't mind that conflict side of things. And as long as I feel like I'm being true and honest to myself and sort of, I guess, the greater good or the industry, I kind of don't mind if I ruffle some feathers in a way that's not being, I don't want to attack people. I don't want to be like personally attacking and digging people. But if I present a view which I know is going to attract a little bit of confrontation or whatever, I don't mind if I do that in a way that like I'm not calling like individual people out, you know what I mean?
Yes, definitely. And when we look at that, I think there's a few things as we know from the stats. The industry is in demand and it's not really making the impact what's required. So change needs to be done. So if we say the same stuff, which has always been said, fair enough, we're going to appease other people, but we're not going to make the change which is needed. So I think to truly be pioneering, that comes with an element of being innovative and daring to challenge the belief systems. And I also think in with that is absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of absence, because a lot of those not necessarily the stuff what you were bringing forth, but some stuff in like TCM. Yeah. When you look into that, you're like, whoa, like this stuff thousands of years old, there's no evidence. And there's just now, recently, proof of it. And then again, because we were so allured with the shiny baubles of this brand new information, I think we probably absorbed a lot of the stuff which was arguably misinterpreted or slightly inaccurate, which then turns into a game of Chinese whispers. And it can also lead to a reciprocation, like the experience what you had of probably slightly inaccurate information there. So I think when looking at that, there's always that taking everything with a pinch of salt, but also appreciating that absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of absence. Yes. I think that's a key thing there. And it just quickly, there's a really interesting study, like from some dude in Germany, and he got the visible light spectrum and the auditory spectrum, and he laid them over one another, and he found that the auditory tones linked up with the colors associated with the chakras. So the auditory tones for the chakras and the visible light colors for the chakras, they matched. And this is like a new study justifying stuff which is thousands of years old. Yeah, so it's like, whoa, okay. So it's interesting, but yeah, I definitely experienced that. Are there any others? Are there any others? What you've kind of like any mistakes? What you've made in this industry on your journey, which you've had to have a hard lesson from and grow through?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one is like, I don't know how to sort of summarize this, but I guess it's almost like this idea of, I know, you would talk a lot with your like mentoring clients and coaches you work with, but like knowing your worth and your value and the value you're providing. And not so much of like not understanding the value I was providing, but I guess for me, it's always been this balancing act of I know that the people I work with tend to be really sick people. Yeah. Yes. And so I've always wanted to have this sort of this balance of like, I'm not undervaluing myself, I'm not undervaluing my service, but I still don't want to be inaccessible to people who I know need me most, who tend to be people who maybe wouldn't otherwise be able to afford a coach, be able to afford that kind of care or whatever. And so that's sort of in and of itself become a little bit of or been a challenge in the past. But then the extension of that was I was overly conscious. And what I know now is that if someone is sick enough and they value getting healthy enough, they're going to make sacrifices and they're going to make something work, right? Like I know that now. I know that from working with clients who can't even get out of bed, they're not working, and yet somehow they can afford my services for 6 months or a year, whatever. But what I started doing at times is I thought to myself, I know, like I put onto someone my own sort of understanding of their situation. And I would say, well, I know that this person can't work. I know that this person, is in X, Y, Z situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pare back kind of the amount of supplements I use with them, or kind of like what my recommendations might be for them. I just want to make it a little bit more accessible for them. And I got to a point where I thought, you know what? Sometimes what I do is maybe there was like a dozen supplements I know that I needed to use with that person. And I thought, no, I'm just going to use 6. And it got to a point where it's like, actually, I've saved the money in the short term, but I'm costing them in the long term because I actually need all of those 12 to get better. Yeah. And so it was like this. And I mentioned this because I still see coaches do this a lot. I've got a lot of mentoring clients where they're like, I can't give this person that many supplements. I can't give them 8 supplements. I have to give them 5. It's like, why is 5 the magic number? This person actually needs 8. You're saving them money if we give them 8. And so that was something I had to come to terms with, where, because I didn't want to be known as like coach who's like, oh, Jake, he gives everyone like 20 supplements. It's like, I didn't want to be that, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I want to be the coach who, Jake, he actually fixed me when no one else could. Yeah. And for me to do that job, it means I actually need to use the tools that I need. Yeah. So that was like a turning point for me a couple of years ago, where I realized that I was shortchanging everyone else if I actually thought I was helping them by not giving them what they needed.
See, I experienced something similar, but took a different approach, which is interesting, which is why I'm loving this chat. So obviously it's easy to recommend supplements, and the more you know, the more you find, and the more you find, the more you can fix. So then it's like, well, fuck, there's like 5 things wrong. What's the hierarchy of this problem? Yeah. What's the root cause? How do I address that? Okay, what are the peripheral things which probably need to be fixed to make this most efficient and long-term? But then it's like, well, fuck, I was finding myself recommending a bunch of supplements, but then I'd also notice a lot of people in the industry recommending a bunch of supplements, but also gaining a boatload of affiliates off that. And you see them recommending the supplements, like, do they really need this? Or is that just to get some extra cash in? And then that polarized me to the concept. And I was like, well, fuck, I think this arguably, I would argue that there's a lost art form of coaching. And that art form of coaching is, first of all, communication, effective communication, which creates education and expectation. But secondary to that, it's like, well, what else can I do to facilitate growth and repair? And that's when I really dived down deep into the powers of different foods and the certain macronutrient splits, and what kind of dietary framework are we going to provide, accompanied with herbs, spices, herbal teas, lifestyle factors, even to the extent of aromatherapy, which is questionable but yields interesting things. But like, I accompanies this all systems biology holistic perspective to kind of facilitate change. So I went down that approach because I had that same kind of realization as you, but then I was like, well, what else? And then obviously there are the extreme cases which you're referencing, where like someone could need a fuck ton of supplements, which obviously that is a needs must. But I'd also say, in addition to that, you have kind of the 2 camps as such, right? You got ones which are fearful of recommending supplements, and then the other camp which recommends a fuck ton with affiliates. Yeah. It's like, well, how do we dance in between them both? Yeah. And that's when it comes into, it's more important to understand the client and the goal the client has, and understanding what do they need for them to take that next step, which is interesting. But it is a completely lost art form, I would say.
Yes. That is such an important point for coaches listening to this. I think this is one of the most important points they need to understand, is that it's not just, it is about the client's needs, but it's not just the overall needs of the client. It's also about their desires and their goals and their wants as well. So, I had this client this one time, I remember, where she had a whole stack of like neurological issues. She was diagnosed with bipolar, anxiety, depression. And for her, she ticked every single yeast and candida symptom in the book, right? And I know without a shadow of a doubt, at least some, if not most or all of those neurological symptoms she was experiencing, they were connected to that yeast overgrowth.
Yep.
But for her, she'd come to me and she goes, all I want is to lose weight. I don't care about anything else. And I had that conversation with her. I'm like, look, I think this is an issue for you. This is what it's doing. This is how it affects you. Nah, I just want to lose weight. And for her, it was like, I'm not going to, like, maybe I'll apply 2 supplements, but that's it. I'm not going to spend a cent more than that. And so for me, I could have looked at it and been like, well, bad luck. I know this is wrong with you. I'm still going to make you fit into my model. And maybe that was the right thing to do, but it's not what I did, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to make you lose weight. Let's do that. And, we worked on some of the eating psychology, and we worked on some of the, meditation she could use, and some, emotion freedom technique and whatever stuff to help her psychologically while she was doing it. But, at this point, I haven't been working with her for years. Does she still have the yeast overgrowth? I would suspect she does. But it meant that we were able to work together for 1 or 2 years, achieve what she thought were her goals. You know what I mean? And so I see that with clients all the time, like coaching clients, where they come to me and they say, look at this person's bloods, or this person's got these health conditions, but they're being medicated. They're happy with it. They're not interested in changing their diet. They're not interested in cutting out gluten or X, Y, Z. What do I do? And I say to them, don't do anything. Like, work on what their goal is, because, we all know you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. Well, It's going to be an awful bloody journey for you as a coach if you're forcing a client to work on something they're just not interested in. Have that conversation, but you can't force them to do it.
Hey, just quickly, if you're a health coach or a personal trainer, we have a free gift for you. Make sure you join my free Facebook group, Health Coaching Secrets, to receive world-class trainings and behind-the-scenes worksheets which actually work, so we can help you level up your coaching. The link is in the bio.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant point to make, is as coaches, we can often superimpose what we want the person to do on their goal. And that's a dangerous game, because that can breed things like orthorexia all the way through to other problems. But in the same tone, there's also a level of education and expectation to be made, where people may actually have a different level of how they view themselves, a level of self-value, where they may actually change to observe or obtain some of those behavioral responses required to address the issues. So it really is a difficult line to tread. And I think the best thing, as always, is to give clients what they want, but if you can, also what they need. Because that way, giving them what they want is happy days. They are feeling valued. You're working with them. They will continue and adhere to what you say and be consistent. But giving them what they need can sometimes be that kind of physiological handbrake, or the root cause as to why emotions are responding in a certain way, behaviors acting in a certain way, and other things. And I think that again, when we come into this coaching world, this is that secret dialogue of the online coach, which is to determine what do they want, what do they really want, why do they want it, and am I making sure that I don't impose what I think they should do on top of that? And that is just that delicate line to walk along. And it only comes with experience, walking along that tightrope, because it becomes so easy to think like, well, like, hey, if you're in that situation, be like, well, do this, do that. But chances are as well, if she did lose weight, chances are she's going to be making dietary choices, which are going to be more dense in nutrition and less palatable, which therefore may change her digestive system in terms of candida and things like that. Maybe there's going to be a greater respect for energy dense foods because of the palate change and things like this. Who knows? But I think that's a really interesting point, which a lot of people also miss and is never discussed online. Because let's face it, online, it's just shit like how to get rid of SIBO with 5 supplements. It's like that's what we see online, but it's never like, how can I meet that person to give them what they need and want? And I think that's a fucking thing which is hard to communicate online. It really is.
It's very hard. How would you communicate that? It's near impossible. But and that's, like you said, that only comes with experience. For me, when I talk to a new client, I know, like, innately, I know kind of what they're capable of matching, what they're going to give me. And I know that, okay, this person is not in a place where they're able to give me, adherence to an antimicrobial protocol. They're not able to, do a SIBO protocol. For them, all they're able to give me is dietary changes, maybe some lifestyle changes. Great. That is, it's going to take their health from like a 1 to a 5. That's great. It's not going to get us to a 10, but if I tried to get them to a 10, I'm going to lose them completely.
And that brings up another thing as well. I think with health coaches, we can be so fixated on what optimal is.
Yeah.
That therefore also creates an issue, because a client may have a great win, and it doesn't mean they've finished the race, but they've had a great win, but we're like, your ALP's gone from 40 to 50. It's still low, versus like, well, fuck, your LP's risen. It's improved.
Yes.
And I think though that expectation, not only in what the client should do, but the expectation in the results, what you get, is also important to manage, because that will determine how they feel about that experience, which determines how they value you moving forward.
Yeah.
So
do you know who are the worst for that? Is coaches. Like when you actually coach coaches and then the coach has a protocol and they come back and like, I thought I was doing well, man. All my symptoms, like these symptoms are all gone, but I've got this one symptom left.
Yes.
And look at my blood work. My cholesterol's gone up. Like the gut protocol not work. And it's like, dude, like look at like all your liver enzymes are perfect now. White blood cells perfect. Digestion near perfect. You can introduce these foods back in, and you're telling me you're questioning whether anything worked because you can't eat this one food, or you want to eat gluten and you eat gluten and somehow, you still have digestive symptoms and you think therefore nothing worked.
Yes.
Man, I find coaches shockers for that.
Here's another one, man. Oh, this is such a good kind of worms. I find a lot of coaches obsessed with objective and neglect the subjective. So it's like, the HRV hasn't changed, or your weight hasn't changed, or the bloods hasn't changed. But the client's like, I actually feel great. I'm having a great time with my kids, my family. I've got more energy in the morning. I don't feel bloated and I'm feeling good. And we're like, it doesn't say you've changed. Well, to be honest, it's like the objective data gives you the detail. The subjective data gives you the story. They marry one another. We can't disregard one just because one hasn't changed. I think that's a massive thing missed with most coaches, which I've just recognized largely now.
I think that is like an extension of that. I think one of the most important skill sets a coach can acquire is becoming good at that subjective stuff you're talking about there. And I would say like symptoms is part of that. And, it's all well and good. And I think, this is something I think you largely sort of rubbed off on me a little bit as well, is that it's all well and good understanding lab work, but that's at most half the picture. I honestly think you get just as much, if not more information from symptoms than you do from blood work. And 100%. Then you combine the two and man, you actually get the full picture. I find you barely need any additional testing. I don't know about you, but I hardly ever do GI maps and O-tests and Dutch tests. Once in a blue moon, I do this stuff. Because if I do a thorough symptom assessment and just get bloods, man, that is 95% of what's going on. But people just try to use bloods.
And this is it. And this is it. Because when we look at like the human body, there's over 70 things we can look in the human body to gain insight into nutrient deficiencies, symptoms, or dysfunctions. I mean, there's so much, like even just on the face, looking at the face. And by neglecting that, we miss an opportunity, which is non-invasive, remote-free, and arguably cost-free. Whereas there's the lag time of getting the bloods done. Is the doctor going to do the full bloods? Is it going to be interpreted properly? Did they fast before? Did they abstain from training? Did they go to the sauna before? All of this. And when you can learn to read the human in front of you, it now gives you real-time feedback as to when things need to be progressed, regressed, or changed, because you can read them as opposed to reading some bloods. And don't get me wrong, bloods is phenomenal. I think bloods, obviously, like I'm a huge proponent of both. And it's like on bloods, you may see things like, okay, let's see that you've got high basophils. Yeah. Okay. And you hear thinking, well, is that like an issue with mold? Is it an issue with candida? Is it because you have allergies and you went and stayed at your sister's who's got a fucking cat, and we're not going to easily be able to determine what that is without asking questions. The secret sauce to life is asking bigger and better questions.
Yeah.
So bloods gives you a framework to actually ask the right questions. It's the directive to understand the timeline and sequential order of events, to therefore understand, this person has low ferritin, but then I look and there's issues with, let's just say, low ALP and issues with total protein, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I asked the right question. You find out, well, in the past they've had a H. pylori infection. You'd be like, well, I need to look and make sure that H. pylori infection is addressed. Because if you try to rectify the issues with the ferritin and implement things like spleen extract or whatever you want to do, if you fucking disregard the root cause and the questions behind the root cause, which actually tell you the real root cause, you're just going to be chasing cat and tail, you know?
But it's just so simple. It's so like, this is, I know I said before that was the most important thing. This is the most important thing, because how could you possibly look at blood work and think that's all you need? You know, you gave the example of basophils. I think a really good example, let's say AST and let's say AST, ALT, ALP. Okay. If you look at those and they're elevated, like what could that be? Like I'll just give two examples. It could be gallbladder issues, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be parasites. As an example.
Or
and so you get someone,
could be training. It's like, and then that fucks.
It could be, totally. You need to ask, hey, did you do this? And exactly. But if we just look at those two examples, then you look at symptoms and someone's like, my whole family's had their gallbladder out. I get this kind of like weird pain when I eat fatty foods. It's like, well, what do you think's the most obvious answer there? You know, I always come back to this when I'm on a consult with a client. I say, honestly, the way I look at things is the most obvious answer is probably it, right? If you're telling me you get bloody pain when you're eating fats and I'm seeing ALP high, I think the most obvious answer is you've got a gallbladder issue there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah? But if you're like, no, I don't have any issues with fats. I don't have any gallbladder issues, family history, no issue with gallbladder, nothing like that. But I just went to Bali and I freaking got Bali belly.
Yeah.
Well, freaking hell, you've got a parasite. Yeah. Like, but how could you just look at the blood work and make that conclusion? You've got no chance of doing that. No chance.
Yeah. And I think that is a really valid point, really, really valid point. Because I think we'll get into it I say it in a second. I don't know how long until we get into it, but in the future of this industry, I do see blood work being a staple, because it's gone from counting your steps to then wearing a Fitbit to now wearing an Oura ring to now bloods. And that's just something what everyone is going to do, because health at current is arguably a luxury. It's hard to get and hard to obtain, but it should be a birthright. But when we view how we can improve that, I think that is a big component. But before I jump ahead, let's just look at industry challenges now. And there's a few what I've thought of, and there's one which I'm sure we share equal frustration on. But again, I'd love to open up dialogue and see your thoughts on this, dude.
Just overall, just challenges in the industry.
Current industry challenges, man. Yeah.
Ooh, I mean, look, that's a big question, hey? And I think some of it does feed into the earlier stuff we brought up, like that evolving skill set that people need. Because again, coaches came into this industry passionate about training, passionate about that actual coaching. Like, because how often you get a coach you're mentoring, and they say, "Man, I'm struggling not being with people all the time." You know, I got into this industry because I'm an extrovert. I'm a people person. I like being on the gym floor. I like talking to all the members. And now you're telling me to go online where I'm on a Zoom and I'm trying, like, I've got no accountability, like you said before. So for coaches, I think that's a huge challenge, is that evolving skill set they do need. But, you know, as far as like the industry as a whole, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. I don't want to be like cynical here, but it just feels to me like health is just declining. I mean, obviously we know health is declining, but beyond that, I just mean like, it's like we are living in a society that is set up to make us sick, right? Like, and it's just worse. Like, it's getting worse, right? Our food supply. Yes. Well, not only is it not profitable, but it's like sick is profitable and it's cheap. And, you know, our food supply is designed to make us sick. Cosmetics we're using and chemicals we're using and all the endocrine disrupting stuff that's designed to make us sick. Like, it just feels like unless you live in a cave, like you're going to run into this stuff now. Yeah. And even coaches, even people who, you know, we might work with who are doing things, you know, quote unquote, well, and they're looking after the health and, you know, whatever else, like it's still going to catch up with them, you know? And so like you mentioned before, this sort of like, you know, almost like quality issue with coaches in a sense. Well, how much of it is because of that? Like, how often do you work with a coach and, you know, you're mentoring them and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, by the way, I just got this question about myself and like, you know, check out my bloods, and you look at the bloods, it's like, shit, man, like, how are you doing what you're doing? Look at what's happening in your blood work. That is a shit show right now. Yeah. And it's like, these are people who are epitomizing a healthy lifestyle. and their gut is ruined. Their microbiome's ruined, their hormones ruined. Like, I had a mentoring client just this week show me his bloods, and he's a competitor, and he's doing well. He's not enhanced, anything like that. And his testosterone's like, what was it, like 290 or something like that. And it's like, that's just the state we're in,
Yes.
So how are we going to have, you mentioned doctors who have a lower life expectancy than their patients. Well, we're not much better, right? Like, coaches, we're not much healthier. So how are we going to be transforming, revolutionizing this health industry when we're kind of sick and struggling with brain fog and needing to nap and it's a blind leading the blind, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And that's the problem. I truly believe education is a big solution for that. One big solution. Yeah. Empowering people on the choices, what they make and what that can lead to impacting their life. I see that as a big one. And I truly see health coaches almost as the renegades of society. Like you look at the course and path of what society is being led upon. I see not many industries challenging the consensus of mainstream world. Yeah. I think the one which challenges it the utmost are health coaches.
Yeah.
Because it is creating sovereignty of health. It is creating empowerment, education, and all these other things. So I truly see it as like the mavericks, the renegades, almost like the Vikings of the 21st fucking century. But it comes with increased challenges, which leads on to a point which I think, I know you also experience, is censorship. Because of this global kind of consensus and direction of which it wants the society to be, that also comes with a great deal of censorship. Now, I would argue there's opportunity in that because that creates tribes and that creates community. And with a community, we can grow and stick together and be together. And I think we have probably benefited from that on the back end. I mean, like when the pandemic started, how many followers were you at? Like 10,000? Now you're at what, 35,000, is it? Like it's grown like 3.5 times because of the kind of censorship, which means people want to actually stick around, support, and find their tribe of like-minded people. And it builds a better community, which is great on a micro perspective. But if this is continued over a number of years, well, it's the modern day version of book burning. So then, what does that censorship actually do? We already see the educational system changing drastically to the point at which it is a living nightmare. But I think that is arguably one of the biggest challenges what we have. But I do think on a micro perspective, in this small amount of time frame what we've had, I think it's I think it's backfired slightly and served a bit of a benefit. But if it continues, I think it's going to be a huge detriment to mankind.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said, we've benefited from it only to the extent that individuals, we want to congregate around people with similar like values, and we find identity in being connected to those people with those similar values, and so it's meant that people have gravitated towards certain pages and certain people, and they're willing to share that because it echoes what they value. And so, like, I know for me, the only way my account has grown in the last 2 years, like, I don't know if my hashtags have worked for 2 years, right? Like, it's been, I think there was like a period of like 6 weeks where stuff started working. It's like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? Like, I started getting followers again, and then it all stopped again. And the only reason like my account is still in any way expanding is because individuals sharing my content, not at all because Instagram's rewarding me and putting my stuff out there, but it's because people that resonates with them as what they value, what they identify with. But like you said, if this keeps going at a certain point, what's going to happen? Like you're not even going to be like, it works now because people still have those values. They came in contact with those things before it was fully censored. But if we censor stuff for another 10 years, no new people are going to come into contact with any of these new beliefs or whatever. And so I don't know, where's that going to lead?
Exactly. I think I read a stat like it takes 2 generations to reform society.
Yeah.
So because obviously it's the parents therefore modeling that behavior to the children. It's alarming. It really is. But hey, that's why
people don't realize that it's happening. Hey, like, and it's weird because like I post about it and you've posted about it, lots of people post about it, and then I have a conversation with someone and like, no, that's not happening, is it? It's like, no, yeah, I'm actually not joking here.
Yeah.
I had Instagram message me and say they've deleted my post because I said vitamin C in it.
Oh,
and they're like,
YouTube deleted some of my stuff like last week or this week,
Yeah.
and we've not posted on there, man, for like 5 months.
Yeah. And people are like, wait, what? You're joking. That didn't happen. It's like, no, it's actually happening. This is not a joke. This is literally happening all the time.
Yeah. And it's alarming, which also leads on to the next point is in this industry, I find that the easiest way for people to stand out is by having a big ego, right? Okay. The harder way to stand out is by getting world-class results. Okay. And I find a lot of people, because it is super saturated and certain topics are censored, that they gravitate towards that easy way of just being that person which slanders and disrespects everyone and anyone just so they can get a bit of attention and grow their following. And I think that is a challenge right now, is that the emotive response of this is more of a soapbox than it is edutainment, like education and entertainment kind of thing. I think that's a big problem, is that the industry is not only censored with the value what is provided, but over supported with those of dogmatic egos.
You can tell if someone's goal is to educate you or to stroke their ego and get followers. Honestly, if they name someone else in that post, it's not to educate you. Because I can very easily put together a post and say, here's why intermittent fasting is wrong. Not that I believe that at all, but whatever. And you can and let's say there can be a really contentious issue at that point in time, partials. I could put together a post, here's why partial squats is bad. Again, I don't believe that, but I could do that. And everyone looking at that knows, oh, he's talking about Joel Seedman stuff. Great. Doesn't matter. I don't need to say Joel Seedman in that post. Yeah. Again, I don't disagree with a lot of his content. But if I put out a post and say, here's why Joel Seedman's wrong, it's like, that's not me trying to educate you. I was doing a better job educating you by telling you what I believe about full range of motion as opposed to partials. Yeah. And so I like an alarm bell should be going off. As soon as someone's posted, here's why so-and-so is wrong. Here's why so-and-so is an idiot. Here's why so-and-so blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, that is no longer, their goal at this point is no longer you. Yeah. Like their goal is their self.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like people have content rather than concept. And that stops people from thinking for themselves. Instead, we want to teach people how to think. And by giving the concept, which isn't as sexy, but giving them a framework of thinking to explore and navigate is where empowerment comes, because then they can make the decisions for themselves rather than rely on regurgitating the information.
I put out this post a while ago, and it's one of those ones, I'm sure you have these, where as you're putting it out, you're like, man, this is so profound. This is so insightful. It's going to do so well. And then it just tanks. Yeah. It's one of those to me. And what I was getting at was like, I don't want to be anyone's health guru. And I think that this whole notion of a health guru, this is so problematic, because people are building people up to be infallible. And what happens is you go to the next guru and you become their disciple for a year, 6 months, whatever. And then they say something you disagree with. Like, I'm sure you've had this. I've had people in my DMs, oh, I followed you for 2 years. I loved you. And then you just said this. And now I freaking hate you. And it's like, great. I'm really happy I let you down, because you need to know that no one is ever going to never let you down. And the problem is you're going to get stuck in a cycle now where you're going to find another guru who you think has all the freaking answers, and they don't. And then a year later, they're going to let you down, and you're going to go find someone else. So we need to get past this idea of, well, here's this sensei who has all the freaking answers for me. No. This person is providing you ideas, concepts, some knowledge, some answers. Some things are going to get right, some things are going to get wrong. And it's all there to empower you to learn to think for yourself and learn to weigh up all the evidence ahead of you, as opposed to you just offboarding all that thinking to one individual.
Yeah. And I think that's also key. It's key to recognize that there's different ways to think and different things to do. And arguably, when we get all stoic and stuff, it's nothing is either good or bad. It's the thinking which makes it so. So just because someone has a notion or preferred preference or way to do something, shouldn't be anything else is excluded. In fact, the biggest goal is to kind of diversify opportunity, double down on one, understand that, and then experience others to truly master your own craft, rather than being a regurgitated fucking clone from their perceived follower. Like you mentioned at the start, it's like double down, have a baseline, but then don't get stuck in that baseline either. I think it's important to make sure that you are not just getting stuck in your same cycle of doing the same shit day in, day out. It's important to evolve, adapt, and respond, because if you don't experiment, you can never improve. So I think that's a key thing there, is taking that with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
There's another thing as well. We mentioned about like how people aren't taught how to run businesses online, but there's the changing dynamics of social media, and that's an interesting topic as well, because I think there was initially a level of confusion where people perceive, shit, if I get more followers, I'm going to make more money. And just because you have more popularity on social media or you have a big audience doesn't mean you're making a bigger impact or making more money or getting more clients or doing your job better. And I think that's an interesting thing there, because when we look into social media, there's some huge changes with that. And I think that's changed the response of how we should handle things. And one fucking example here, and it grinds my balls. I'm sorry to any of the students who do this, but look, we're bigger than that. We're better. But you know the reels where everyone's like, pointing into fucking thin air.
Yeah.
It's like a nursery teacher teaching at fucking nursery. You know, that's not what a health coach is. You're reducing your skill set down to nothing. Right.
Well, do you know what though? I wonder with people who are doing that, again, not throwing shade at anyone doing it, but I would love for those people to go back and look at the statistics that they get off those posts. Mm-hmm. And my suspicion, I don't know, but my suspicion is that they're probably not bad for engagement, but they're probably shit house for conversions. And I know for me, there was about maybe 2 years ago, I made this sort of change on social media where I was spending freaking hours putting together these posts, and they'd be like super educational. I'd be like, man, there's so much freaking value in this post. Like a coach could take this, they could write a whole freaking like SIBO protocol just based on this one post alone. Like it's next level, and I get like 50 likes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, oh fuck, I'll put out this post about like something that, is just really surface level. Like it's just an attitude kind of shift, like nothing's going to change until you change. And then suddenly it gets, 2,000 likes and everyone shares it. I'm like, that's the answer. I just need to make it layman's terms, put out this like almost like feel good kind of content, and I put it out. My engagement was freaking awesome. Yeah. I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm onto something here. And then I dawned on me, I'm like, shit, I haven't had any leads for a while.
Yes.
And I found out that yes, engagement was good, but people don't trust you to solve their health issues they've had for 20 years because you said, hey, be the change you want to see.
I'm trying to find you something whilst you're speaking. So please continue, because I've got some evidence to show this as well, man.
Interesting. Yeah. But, people trust you because they perceive you as an expert. And so really what I think a robust social media plan is both of those. It's the stuff that's relatable, that's showing that you're human, that's showing kind of how you feel about things that people buy into and they want to share that. But you also need content there that shows actually you really know your shit. You are an expert in that space.
This is it. I'm going to share the screen. So for the listeners listening into the podcast, so this is back a bit ago. There's how many impressions is that, dude?
It's backwards. So I'm going to struggle to tell you.
Okay, so it's over 7 days. Yeah, there's 1,919,501 impressions, and accounts reached was 157,958 just in 1 week.
Yep.
Did I make any clients then? No. When have I had my most profitable months? When I posted least on social media, but connected and communicated most. So what I found is actually fucking speaking to people and communicating to them and connecting with them on social media. That is when I make clients, because I am serving people. I am communicating, connecting, and being like, hey, look, what's your goal? How can I help you? That works great, but that's behind the scenes. That's behind the fucking, the Wizard of Oz kind of curtain, so to speak, and when we look at that exactly what you mentioned, the impressions, the engagement, it doesn't translate. And that's where people get mixed up and confused. And that's arguably why they're like, oh, well, let's put some trending fucking music on it. And it's like, yo, come on. Like, what is your core values? What is your purpose? What is your mission? What are you proud to do today to look back in 5 years' time and be like, I did that. I led that. I did that. Pointing into thin air with some fucking music on and dancing with poorly lip dubs fucking sync probably isn't something you're going to be proud on in 5 years' time. Right? Let's move on to the future of this industry. What do you see in the future?
I was thinking about this before, and I actually thought it's a little bit paradoxical, or it kind of goes against a little bit of what we sort of said so far. But I still believe everyone needs to have this evolving skill set where, like you said, people are going to start to need to know blood work. Like I do believe that. I do think that we're going to need to have a good understanding on blood. We're going to need to have a good understanding on symptoms. We're going to need to have a good understanding on anatomy and technology and whatever else. But at the same time, I also feel like we're moving into a space which is more interconnected, community sort of focused or based, where coaches are working together.
Yes.
And so there may, like, I still think you need to be, you know, for lack of a better term, a jack of all trades. I still think you need to have a basic understanding of all these concepts, but there might be individuals then in that space who, you know, their niche is prehab work, or their niche is lab work, or their niche is whatever. They're really good in that individual thing. And then I think being connected to those people. And I think I'm excited for that, you know, and I think we've seen that even in, I feel like there's more people engaging in mentoring. I feel like there's less, because there is not just a lot of saturation, but there's so many people who need health coaches now. We don't really need to be that competitive, do we? You know, if 75% of people in Oz have a chronic health condition, long-term health condition, well, shit, does it matter if I actually help 10 other coaches be better coaches? That's not going to affect how many leads I get, because there's actually literally millions of people who need people like me and you. So I think that shift where people are becoming less guarded and they're less scared to kind of help other coaches, and they're less fearful of offering up kind of what they do know, their own expertise. I hope we're moving a little bit more into that space.
I think that's a big thing there, because it's like when we look into the whole kind of it's almost like the growth stages, right? When you're born, you're dependent on your mother to breastfeed you, then you become independent as a teenager, but then we move into interdependency, and that's where we can grow as a synergy. Like the sum is bigger than its individual parts. So when we look at that, it's like what we're doing right now, right? We both have similar values, but we do very different things. And it's awesome, it's magical, it's brilliant, and we can come together and support one another rather than attack each other. So I think, you know, that connection, that community is key, and that's going to be really identified with the efficacious, purpose-driven coaches. The ones which are doing it for a purpose are the ones which come together. The ones which are doing it for monetary gain are the ones where like, fuck you, you're taking away my money. And I think that's the big difference there. And I think the ones which are sincerely health first will abolish the boundaries of, oh, that's just another coach, to cool, let's see what we can do together. How can we support one another? So I think that's a big thing. And in addition to that, we mentioned about blood work becoming a staple because of the tracking of biometrics. I think there's a death happening of personal trainers. I really see it. Like personal trainers are not personal trainers. Personal trainers are emerging and evolving into health coaches because they belong to the health and fitness industry, but the health and fitness industry is missing health. And it's just and fitness industry. And it doesn't serve long-term value, because when we look at the challenges into arguably an upcoming catastrophic recession, things are going to be spent on value and depth, and health is arguably one of the biggest ROIs what we can have. So when we look at this, I think the personal training thing for surface level gain is going to continue to dwindle out, but there's the emergence and rise of the health coaches, which are truly changing lives by helping people to reclaim their lost health. That's what another thing, what a big thing what I see.
I entirely agree. You know, I wouldn't, if I was a PT at the moment, I wouldn't feel overly secure in my job security. But the people I've been coaching or mentoring over the last couple of years who have moved into that health space, they've evolved from just a PT to actually more holistic health. Those people, not only are they securing the business, but those people have, you know, double, triple their business in that time, while other people are going out of business.
With the students, with some of the students, we've got like a few students now. I think there's a handful which have just hit their first 7 figures, and there's an absolute load which are doing 6 figures. There's even like I think a 23-year-old who was doing over $500,000 from his spare bedroom. But these are like health. These are health coaches, like these are actual meaningful change and impact, which just shows you, like at the very start when we spoke about the industry stats, is clearly in demand,
Yes.
but like how fragile and delicate is a personal training business built in a gym, which could be closed from government mandates, lockdowns, COVID, this and that, and everything else. Not to mention you're limited by your geographical radius, the affluence in your area, and the working times just terrible. So I see that massively. I just see the personal trainers imploding, which is arguably, you know, good in a way. I think out of value into society, I do honestly, as we would both agree, see that health coaches provide an incomparable level of value versus getting someone ready for competitions and photo shoots where there's I've seen this time and time again, and I have no doubt that you have, but women losing their hair, losing the cycle, stress-induced amenorrhea, all the way through to gut health issues, not to mention the body dysmorphia and stuff. You know, that doesn't serve that greater purpose, but that's one thing. Is there other stuff what you see happening in this industry?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I just love what you said there about that need to reclaim health, because we haven't had that need before, at least not in the time that I've been coaching. What else?
I'm seeing health right now as a luxury. And I see in the future, you know, what creates a dividing class is arguably right now is money. Yeah, that's what creates a class divide. I think a component of that moving forwards would also be health. Yeah, which creates a class divide, because health is expensive. And I would say it's engineered to be so. You know, when we look at versus chemically laden, nutrient void food, if we want to call it food, in comparison to your biodynamic, organic, locally grown vegetables, for instance, like there's a big price difference there. Yeah. And that is a byproduct of what people can afford. So when we look into the future socio-economic dynamics, I truly believe that health would be a separating factor in class. Not that it should be the case. No, not at all. I truly believe health is a birthright. But I think that is something which we're currently moving towards. And with that, I do think health, there's the opportunity to health become more valued if that is the case. Now, whether or not that will happen is a percentage. It's not a majority percentage. I'd say it's less than 50%, but there is the percentage there for that to be a tertiary response, I believe. But I'd also see obviously the growth of social media, but I also see the transmergence of social media now into channels and groups, which is exactly what you've done. You know, like you've got your WhatsApp channel, we've got the Institute, and I see now it's arguably we're not spending so much time on social media in comparison to what we do in the community. So I see this bigger and bigger shift to this community-centric kind of component here as well.
Yeah. I mean, what you were saying about like health essentially becoming more expensive and you know, you have to be able to pay almost to afford health nowadays. I think the flip side of that is the negative costs or the actual cost of not being healthy then. And, you know, I put up a post the other day about the cost of disease for a female with endometriosis. It's like $17,000 in Australia per year.
The same as the nationwide Australian economic burden of endometriosis is the same as diabetes. But yet dudes don't even know what endometriosis is, but it costs the fucking country the same.
Yeah. And most of that is lost productivity. And so, you know, that's individuals who they can't work a week of every month or 5 days of every month, you know? And so how much is that going to cost an individual? Well, I mean, the stats will tell us it's $17,000 or thereabouts per year, but that's going to be, you know, if we are looking at, you know, you've mentioned potentially like, you know, financial sort of circumstances declining and whatever else, well, that's not going to be a cost people can bear. You know, that's going to be more expensive than actually becoming healthy is going to be. And so, you know, there is going to be that sort of, I do think, you know, even the pandemic, that's sort of started to open people's eyes to it a little bit. But I think coming out of that, you know, as stuff maybe does potentially become a little bit tougher and people do continue to decline in health, I do think people are going to start to see that loss of productivity and
workforce productivity,
potential.
Reduced ROI. Yeah. Like when we look into USA, there's some stats indicate that it's $650 billion US lost per year for presenteeism. So not absenteeism, where you can't go to work because you're in pain or got illness. Presenteeism is where you are distracted and you're not fully present.
Yeah.
I would argue it's far greater, but nonetheless, the
Yeah.
stats show it's $650 billion US per year. And we could look into the average attention span in some studies showing that humans now have a lower attention span than goldfish in some cases. And that's from the digital dementia through to, you know, the cognitive load and push notifications, everything else. I think, yes, I think there is going to be this financial awareness. I think that's a big thing there. What we're discussing is the rise in financial value from corporations to nurture and invest more into health.
Yeah.
That's a big one there. Is
that
there any
will be
others?
Interesting. I mean, just what you said there, I don't know if people understand the implication of what you said, but, you know, we've seen, you know, I'm sure you know these stories as well, like big businesses, multinational businesses who are hiring health coaches to optimize their, you know, their sort of management teams and their corporate teams so that they are more productive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even, you know, this is a conversation that's been going on for years. I remember the first gym I worked at, we actually got a contract with the local, I forget what the business was, but our whole thing was we just went in and worked with their management team to try to get them functioning better. And the idea was if they're functioning, if they're healthier people, A, there's going to be less, you know, money lost because they're going to be sick, but B, just even, you know, how much more work can they do in an 8-hour day compared to what you said, if they're present, but they're not actually, you know, they're distracted and whatever else. And that's what I was talking about with coaches before. Coaches are not immune to that. You know, coaches are sitting at a computer doing 8-hour days, 10-hour days, you know, doing online coaching, but they're able to focus for 5 minutes at a time and they're off doing something else. And they're just not getting any actual productive work done because they still have these same kind of health issues going on. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is huge. It really is. And again, when you brought the management thing, one of my closest mates, he always pulls the piss on me because it's a study where he's heard me quote many times. So when he's listening to this, no doubt he's going to give me some rib shots. But there's the Framingham Heart Study, which shows that the influence extends over 3 degrees of separation. So your friend's friend can have an influence on how you are. So then when you look into the health of the management team or the board, well, directly there will be a reciprocal response passed down through not only better management and more stress tolerance, but emotions and everything else within that workplace environment, which is going to bring a massive ROI. So yeah, it's powerful. It's great to hear that they were doing that when you were working over there.
Yeah. And that was, you know, quite a while ago now. I think one thing I do want to mention a little bit sort of different to what we've talked about so far, but you mentioned how, you know, we are going to reclaim the health part of the health and fitness industry. My fear is that we could begin losing the fitness part.
Yes. I see that already as well, in fact.
Yeah.
I see that already.
Yeah. And you see this because, I mean, there's a lot of things playing into it, but people like yourself and myself and coaches who have sort of, you know, pushed into that health space, you know, kind of earlier on, a lot of our influences are, you know, naturopaths and holistic doctors and, you know, maybe TCM and some of these alternative therapies, and they're great, but I would argue a lot of these places have a really poor handle on fitness and exercise and sometimes even nutrition. And so when we do move into these places being bigger influences for us, partnered with being based online, where you're not actually seeing an individual move in space and you're not cueing them and you're not getting that appropriate reception, you know, engagement, I think we're going to lose that.
Oh, completely. And we see that with you know, that whole meme where what's cardio, is that Spanish sort of thing? Like cardio was heavily bastardized when it was the bodybuilding era because people would be so preservative of their calories as such, but then that neglected the benefits from improving HRV, blood pressure, aerobic recovery zone and everything else, and the breathing rate and everything there. It's just almost forgotten about and neglected because we are children of that era, which was heavily swayed around bodybuilding and calories and macros. But now when we take this holistic approach, yes, we can fascinate around blood work, but there is also that kind of functionality of health. The irony is that we are huge advocates of functional health, but most functional health coaches or health coaches aren't functional with their health. Like they may be healthy, but when they place themselves in a different frame of exercise, what they aren't accustomed to, they are no longer healthy, you know? Like how many health coaches do you know? I mean, like, fair enough, I put my hands up. I've been prioritizing the business hard over the past 6 months. And that's, you know, we've done some great things within that time frame, some phenomenal things. So I could definitely be more healthy when it comes to the fitness aspect, but don't get me wrong, we've ordered a bunch of stuff, equipment and stuff like this. So that's going to be there. And I do think things should be prioritized from time to time, but I completely appreciate and understand that, health could be, fitness could be easily left behind. So it's big. Well, dude, it's been phenomenal. Absolutely fucking phenomenal having you on here. What a great podcast to come back with. It's been ginormous in terms of depth, philosophy, learnings and lessons. I think people listening to this are going to have so much value. So thank you for sharing your experience, your wisdom. Where can people find you?
So at the moment, still on Instagram.
Pending ban.
Exactly. So who knows how much longer for, but Coach _ Jake Doleschal. So Doleschal. That's where I'm most active. I do have a Telegram channel, but I tend to only go on that when I'm being actively censored or shadow banned from Instagram. So that's the best place to find my stuff. I do have a website that'll be live in a few weeks' time, but at the moment, social media is the place to be.
What's the website going to be?
That's a good question. I think it's just going to be my name.com, but I still need to confirm that.
Okay, cool. And what about this WhatsApp group of yours? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so it's something I launched earlier this year. It's just a way to, I was getting like a lot of questions on Instagram. I do Q&As once or twice a week, and it's a good opportunity to be able to provide some like next steps for people. But I kind of wanted an avenue to give people more than just that one next step, and kind of give them 4 or 5 next steps to just give them a little bit more data. So I launched a WhatsApp group. I just wanted an easy way to be able to share some of this content that I couldn't easily share on Instagram. And so basically the way that works is people sign up. It's $10 a week, and I'm posting most days of the week, and I'm just sharing all different kind of like health tips, or there'll be like health protocols, there'll be blood work education, there'll be like new studies that come out, and I might share about the new studies. So I try to keep it kind of condensed. Each post is usually a paragraph or two. The protocol is a little bit longer, but I try to sort of hit it so people who are coaches should be able to get a lot out of it, be able to apply a lot of that with their clients. People who are just interested for their own personal health, they should be able to get a lot of value out of that as well. So it's sort of pretty diverse. I've got like practitioners, doctors, coaches, naturopaths, and then just lay people in there. But all the info for that is on my Instagram page at this point as well, if people are interested.
Brilliant. And when you look at that investment into the return, what you get, I mean, like you say, what you've been in this industry, 10 years, did you say?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did that's sort of when I started educating. I sort of didn't really take clients for a little while there. Like I studied sort of sport and then did my fitness certs and did nutrition certs, and kind of only ever wanted to do it out of like my own interests and just sort of work with family and stuff. But then became full-time coaching, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago now, something like that.
Yeah. So it's a chance to bypass so much hardship and gain such relevant, valuable information. You'd be a fool.
Yeah, you'll probably relate to this. I was looking at we've talked about iatrogenesis a fair few times, and it's partly why, and neither of us are sort of too interested in maybe ever going down that sort of medical model. And I had some hate on Instagram, like, oh, you just don't want to, like, you don't have the time to, like, you don't want to dedicate the time to studying medicine. And I was like, actually, I calculated how many hours would be involved in doing a medical degree, and I calculated the cost involved, and I'd spent more time and more money on my own education than what would be involved in doing a medical degree.
This is it. This is like, I've spent over $500,000 to my personal development, but we've partnered with the university to help PhD students get PhDs. So I put 40 different ideas to them, and we have a meeting tomorrow at the university. And I've never been to university, but yeah, that's something which has arisen. And yeah, it's like, you would have seen the stat. There's a 17 to 23 year delay between what's researched today and then put into medical practice. Now, understandably, it has to go through the right trials and efficacious and testing and quality things. Oh, only when they want, because the recent thing didn't even have 5 years. It had like less than 12 months and it was published and used worldwide. But hey, there's a latency between that. And arguably, if you have the drive, determination, passion, and growth mindset, I would say the best lessons are out of the classroom. You know, they're either learning from mistakes, learning from behavior, self-study, or from actual experience.
Yeah. On mentoring, I just can't emphasize how important finding people who have had that experience and then paying them to learn from their mistakes, not yours.
Yes.
You know, I think as a coach, that's one of the best things you can do.
Oh, bro, we made over 100 grand's worth of mistakes last year. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's a lot of mistakes, but I'm grateful for that because I can probably
look at that learning point. Yeah.
And like with the students, I can probably save X that number. You know, like, so if I can help students not make that same mistake, that is an extremely valuable lesson for them, because it's not as valuable for me, but it's a valuable lesson for them. And that's where the beauty lays. So, I think success leaves clues, like we mentioned at the very start. That's a beautiful way to finish this, is by following the crumbs which are laid down on the path. Definitely.
Love it. Yeah. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Honestly, dude, it's really good, and I respect your time, and I'm looking forward to some more catch-ups, and when you can finally come over to Perth, where we're going to do some cool stuff.
We'll train together, mate. Get you back in the gym.
Let's get started again soon, hey? Yeah, amazing. Jake, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you deeply.
Thanks, Jake.
I appreciate you joining us on this session of Health School. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and also share this with all of your friends on social media. Your help goes a long way. Until next time.